Stephanie, you gave a wonderful talk. Could you tell us briefly, for all the people who could not attend, what it was about?
My talk is about how the way we are using mobile devices has changed. And it's kind of a combination of the devices themselves have changed, the behaviors have changed, but also why we use them has changed. There's been a lot of change the last few years, and it's interesting to see why it's happened and why it may be probably going to continue, and what it means as designers, how we have to think about it next.
And what do we have to consider as a designer when we want to design an application which is used today?
I think one of the big things to keep in mind is that mobile devices have now become such a big part of our lives, and they're being used kind of all the time. People, it's not this thing that people kind of think about doing. The phone is always there, it's always turned on, it's always in your pocket, and at any point someone may pick it up and do something with it. And it might be something that actually doesn't feel like a mobile type of thing. It could actually be something very complicated, like they've just received a large PDF from their lawyer and they need to actually read 5 pages of it, and it's very, complicated text, and that's still a mobile activity now. Things that are very long and complicated can be mobile, and things that are very short and simple can be mobile, whereas before we had this idea that if it was mobile it had to be very small, very quick, very simple, and that would be okay because it was a mobile phone. But now all the devices they're kind of blending. The phones are getting a bit bigger, but then there's also tablets, and then there's other devices that are connected, and so people are just kind of going from one device to another and using it whenever they need, and so you just can't predict what they're going to do, which is unfortunate. Because as designers we like to predict, we like personas, we like to think that we know how people will use something, and I think you can still predict a lot about behavior that relates to your product specifically, but you can't necessarily predict whether they're going to use it in their house, whether they'll be in a hurry, whether they'll have a big screen, a small screen. So you have to think of all the different constraints and all the different opportunities as well. What if they're on a really neat device that has this extra little opportunity that the other ones don't? What can you do to enhance the experience? But then at the same time, if they're on a really constrained device, how do you give them a good experience rather than saying to them, oh, sorry, we don't support your phone, which is kind of what happens right now a lot of times.
And is the saying, context is king, still true?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I don't know if it's true anymore. I mean, context is still very important, but I think the thing is actually that you can't predict the context. Or rather, you can't always predict the intent. I think the intent is actually more important than the context, because again, this has a specific context. It's always going to be this size, it's always going to be this heavy. It may or may not be connected to the network. But you actually don't know what my intention is, what my need is, whether it's an urgent need or just a random need, whether I have 5 minutes to kill or whether I need to do something vitally important. And because these are now sometimes our only computer, or they're the primary computer in a lot of cases, intent is actually really all that matters. So it's how to enable for all levels of intent, I think, is the trick and the difficulty. While at the same time delivering a product that people love, and as we know, trying to deliver something for everybody is actually really difficult. You do have to zero in. So it means knowing your customers a lot better, knowing your audience and what they're going to want and what content they actually really want versus things that you think they maybe want or that your marketing department thinks that they want. I think it's just an opportunity to focus a lot more on what people really need.
You told the story about how people are using the browser of Amazon's Kindle. Could you retell it?
Yeah, the Kindle is very interesting. I mean, it's a device that's primarily meant to be for reading ebooks, and so they've used one of those. I think it's e-paper type screen. It's a black and white screen. In some ways, it's like an old black and white television. It's very, very basic in terms of the visual experience because it's meant for text. It's meant to render text beautifully. But there's a browser on it. It's a nice browser, so people are using it. And when I say it's nice, it works well in the sense that it's fairly fast. It can render all sorts of pages. It can even render things like CSS animations. So people are using it. And it's proving quite interesting because the device itself is very hard to use. As an internet device, it's hard to navigate, there's no touch screen, and yet because it's in someone's pocket, maybe it's the only thing they've taken on holiday with them, so they've got it, so they're using it. And creating all sorts of, I think, kind of challenges for designers, because we often tend to assume that if someone has multiple devices, they'll choose the best one for the task, because it's all about the experience, and people want the best experience, we always say. But sometimes the best experience is an experience, and if you have a choice between no experience or the Kindle, well, then it's a beautiful experience, right? So again, it's trying to break free from the idea that the best experience is the only one that people are going to want, and accepting that sometimes a good enough experience will be actually wonderful for someone, and so how do we make good enough experiences actually wonderful? So.
And how will our mobile user experience look like in 10 years?
I think, from everything I've heard anyways, and the way technology is moving, there's going to be more things will be connected, things that we never expected, things like our refrigerator, our toaster, and other things in our house, physical things that we didn't expect. But also there'll be more connectivity in just the spaces around us. So more of a likelihood that we might be able to interact with a wall. And it sounds very space-aged and so on, but actually it is getting a lot closer that these types of things will be relatively normal. And so, from a user perspective, I think actually it could be pretty scary from a user perspective. The big worry in some ways is that it's one thing for one company to design one device and do the best job they possibly can, but once everything is connected, there's so many more points of failure, so many more points of things not communicating with something else, of standards not matching up, of experiences not properly going from one spot to the next to the next. So it's a big challenge, and I think for users. I had that quote in my presentation, that quote from Mark Weiser, that the most significant technologies are the ones that completely disappear. They kind of fade into the background. You don't notice them. And my hope is that the more connected we get, the more the technologies will continue to disappear, that we won't find ourselves 10 years from now incredibly frustrated because our entire house is talking to other parts of our house and they're not talking a language that works, So it actually still needs to be, peaceful and relaxing and feel like you're home and feel like something that you're in control of. And so I think that's our big challenge, is creating peace for people, creating spaces that are friendly and approachable and useful while being so ridiculously connected all the time.
Yes, Stephanie, thank you very much for your talk. Thank you very much for your interview.
Thank you.